Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. This is the podcast to listen to if you're an aspiring writer or an author who wants to be more successful. On this show, you'll learn how to write and launch a book successfully, all from the top authors and people just like you who are doing it at the highest level. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the author of the book called Published, and the CEO of selfpublishing.com. For free training on how to publish a book that sells 10,000 copies, go to selfpublishing.com/free training. Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. On this show, you'll learn how to write and publish a book that grows your impact, income, and business, all from people who are doing it at the highest level. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the owner of selfpublishing.com, and a host of another podcast called the 7-Figure Principles Podcast. For free training on how to get your book published, go to spsfreetraining.com. Let's dive in with today's episode. Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is my good friend John Jantsch. John's been called the world's most practical small business expert for consistently delivering real-world proven small business marketing ideas and strategies. He's the creator of the Duct Tape Marketing System, maybe you've heard of it, and the author of multiple books, including the Referral Engine, Duct Tape Marketing, The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, and his upcoming book, The Ultimate Marketing Engine. Funny story. So John and I have known each other for years. And I was asking for people about books on referrals so that we can grow our referral program at Self-Publishing School. And John's book was one of the ones that just kept coming up, which is hilarious because it's his book, The Referral Engine, because it's about how to get more referrals. So I figured if he could get his referral book referred that frequently, then the book was probably pretty good. We ended up reading it for our the whole company read it as part of our book club. So we got everyone copies. They loved it. It's still one of the favorites. So John's awesome. Today we're going to be talking about duct tape marketing ideas for promoting your book. We're going to talk about how to generate more referrals with using your book, and that's something I really love talking about. And then lastly, some things he's used or he's learned. He's published a bunch of books, and so what has he learned, and how is that changing and evolving with the launch of his upcoming book that launches this year? So John, great to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Chandler. Great to see you and be with you.
So first off, why books? Why are they such a huge part of your brand, your business? I mean, you've published a bunch of books, and it seems like they're at the core of what you do. So why is that?
Well, I think that, I didn't make this up. I mean, it's a pretty proven, principle that somebody who has a book, is considered or often seen by other folks as an expert. It's a great way to, for somebody to try in a lot of ways what it might be like to work with you by kind of reading your point of view, especially my books, which are very how to, it's basically just what we do. I'm distilling into books. So it gives people a really deep look into what it might be like to work with you. And frankly, I mean, 12, 15, 18 bucks to get kind of a distillation of somebody's life work, I think is their books are just a great bargain as well. And the ironic thing about it is, of course, by having that $12, $15 calling card, if you want to call it that, out there, it actually allows you to charge more for your services because somebody has, you've built trust, other people, referred your book to somebody. So consequently, it's like, well, I've got to hire you.
Yeah. As they say, the root word of authority is author. And it's hard to be an authority without being an author in a lot of cases. And I call it $15 mentor. It's just all the smartest, most successful people have written a book for $15, a few hours, you can read it. And like you said, not only does it help you as the author help more people, but also charge more, increase your prices, grow your business faster, all those things. So John, can you walk through, I know this is a big question, but kind of at a high level, what is the duct tape marketing system? And then maybe more specifically, how can authors use this method to sell more books?
Well, I think the biggest thing, especially when it comes to selling more books, is the duct tape marketing system is a point of view. So it's not like, here's the latest, greatest thing. It hasn't changed. The point of view is that marketing is a system. It starts with strategy before tactics. Now, the tactics themselves have evolved. I mean, I started writing about and marketing, helping small business owners market before we had the internet. So that few things have changed, but fundamentally, what we're trying to do, differentiate our business, stand out to who's going to be an ideal client for us. And none of that's really changed. It's just how they buy, how they get their information. Those things have changed. But having a solid point of view and sticking with that point of view that allows you to differentiate yourself is really key. Obviously, the book plays a role in that because it allows you to tell the story in a very deep way.
And so when you say strategies over tactics, what does that mean? As an author, how do I distill that into kind of formulating my strategy for selling more books?
So the tough thing about that particular word, of course, if you Google the word marketing strategy, you will be greeted with a list of 57 marketing tactics, to grow your business. So Google doesn't understand what marketing strategy is. But essentially for us, before, people come to us every single day. I need a website. I need content. I need SEO. Yes, you do. You need all those things, but we're going to back up and we're going to build a foundation for your marketing that first of all, understands who makes and consequently who does not make an ideal client or customer for your business, your core point of difference. And that's not just a matter of saying, yeah, we'll wear purple t-shirts and that'll be our difference. It really is what's the value, what's the problem that you're already solving for that ideal client in a way that maybe you can't even articulate, but I bet they can. Then we're going to talk about developing. I mean, content is really air, for marketing today. It's not a tactic. It's the voice of strategy. So we're going to talk about a plan for how we're going to use content for then every stage of the customer journey, something a proprietary approach or at least label to the customer journey that we created called the marketing hourglass that really acknowledges the fact that most marketers stop at, when somebody says they want to buy from you. But our customer journey suggests that there's 7 phases: know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer. And half of those stages happen after somebody becomes a customer, because, to your point of my, previous book, The Referral Engine, I mean, that's really the goal of all marketing, is to have, raving fans that are generating leads for you. So by having that framework and really communicating, I mean, what I just shared with you, I've probably said 2,000 times because it really, we stop chasing the idea of the week and we come up with something that is that sometimes is luck. I think in my particular case, it's just what I believed was the right approach, but it still floors me today that it is a huge differentiator to start with developing a strategy before you just start saying, well, should we be on Facebook or, should we have pop-ups on our website, which is kind of where everybody else goes first.
Yeah. John, I love this. And we 100% see eye to eye on this. And I think you just you said you've talked about this 2,000 or whatever times. And so you just kind of flew by like a bunch of big concepts. So we've got I think it was know, like, trust, try, buy, refer, try, buy, repeat, refer. You talked about the hourglass framework. You talked about the referral engine piece, which I really want to kind of zero in on that a little bit later in the interview. And so a lot of core things, if you were to maybe put it on a bumper sticker or even just kind of a 3 to 5 step, whatever framework specific to authors, what would you say? So I'm writing this book. I want to launch it. I want it to be successful. I'm not going to just jump to the tactics piece, but the true strategy. What are your thoughts on what you would recommend in terms of developing that strategy?
Well, I think, and this is harder than it sounds. I mean, you asked me to do the bumper sticker, which, kind of belies the fact that this is a lot harder than it sounds. But to me, the key is to truly understand what problem your book is solving and for whom. I mean, that really gets down to it. And it's not, I mean, nobody wakes up and says, I need another marketing book, right? I mean, it's I need to figure out, how to rank higher in the search engines than my competitors do. I need to figure out, how to not undercharge for what I sell. I mean, those are the problems that people are trying to solve. So what problem or core set of problems are you trying to solve with this book and for whom?
That's great. And that's the starting point. And I think that's so important.
I was going to say, having said that, I write, how-to books for marketing. I mean, if you're writing fiction, it's, where do you, what problem does your book solve for somebody who's looking for a book on fiction? I mean, it's really the same, practice. It's just a different set of human conditions.
Yeah. And for any of the fiction listeners or viewers, the thing that we talk about all the time from a fiction perspective is the pain that you're solving is entertainment. And a lot of times genre gaps, right? So maybe there's a gap in the genre that because you're a reader of that genre. You're like, I really wish that there was this type of fiction with this angle or this point of view. Or, gosh, we've got another episode with Rami Vance, Ari Vance on the tier ones, all that stuff. So if you're looking fiction, that'll be a better episode. I'd love to go, John, and just use your new book as a case study of exactly what you just said. So the Ultimate Marketing Engine, can you walk us through kind of how you thought about, hey, what's the problem that you're solving with that book?
Right. So I didn't, this is my 7th book. And I mean, after a while, you got to stop not saying the same thing, in in a different way. So I signed the contract for this book with HarperCollins Leadership, who's going to publish it, on about March 8th of 2020. And about 7 days later, we know the world kind of came to a halt. And a lot of marketers, we're really scrambling around, like, what's going to happen? What do we do? How do we take care of our clients? And one of the things and frankly, I was thinking, what am I going to write about, in this book now? Because it's really being colored by what's going on. And I don't want to write a marketing in the time of COVID book. Nobody wants that anymore. They wanted it for about 6 weeks, but they don't want it anymore. And so one of the things that really struck me was that I had a lot of clients. I mean, some really by no fault of their own. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and we just got decimated. But then I also had a lot of businesses, a lot of clients whose industries really were struggling, but they weren't. And to me, the thing that became painfully clear that, and it's always been true, but I think sometimes when you shine a really bright light on it, you get to see is that the clients of mine that did really well, maintained, and in many cases grew during what was a challenging time for other businesses, were the ones that meant something to their customers. They weren't just filling a transaction. They weren't just a place to go because it was convenient. Their customers wanted them to survive. Their customers wanted to support them in what they saw was a tough time. So this book is really all about, if there's a subtext to this book, it's about, how do we design businesses with a customer success track in mind? Because that to me was what these businesses did differently. And what I mean by that is, instead of just saying, one of my favorite examples that's in the book is a remodeling contractor. Instead of saying, we fix kitchens or, whatever it is that we do, their whole point of view is that they look at a customer and say, okay, here's where they are today, but where do they want to go? Where do they ultimately want to go? Here's where, here's the stage they're in their life. Here's the stage that they're in their, home buying or home remodeling journey. But what do they ultimately want? And they design their entire business and process and even product and fulfillment around the identifying the stages and the milestones that are going to take people from where they are to where they want to go. So that idea of the customer success track is one that I've been applying now to really every type of business. And the innovation in it is, they're not just the best at what they do or what they say they do on their business card. They're the best at growing with their customers, as opposed to just going out and getting more customers who want more of the same.
That's great. And I love that philosophy. So John, where would you, using the framework that you mentioned just a little bit ago, what would you identify as the problem that you're solving with that book? And then how do you use that problem to shape, the title, the subtitle, the hook, kind of all those things?
Yeah. So the big problem that book addresses is the fact that so many people are, trying to work with everybody. They are, maybe successfully working with a large swath of the market, but I believe they could ultimately be more successful and way more profitable if they would actually narrow their focus down to about their top 20% of their clients and build that customer success track with them, for them, with the idea that you're then going to grow with that group of customers instead of, unfortunately, wasting a lot of your time on folks that yeah, you can serve them, but they're never really going to be that perfect customer. What I found is that when I could get people to really focus on that perfect customer and then start asking themselves, what could they do more for them? How could they grow with them, with their entire ecosystem? Referrals are a big part of this book because what we do is we focus on that 20%. We make them so successful that they actually want to be a partner. I actually talk about this idea of customers as members, as opposed to simply, transactions. And that, what happens is the growth that comes from working with their entire ecosystem is so much more profitable than just going out there and chasing somebody else down who says, okay, yeah, I need what you do.
That's great. John, you kind of talked about the ultimate goal of customers as members and actively referring business. What are your thoughts on, how can authors who are also entrepreneurs or maybe even aspiring entrepreneurs, existing entrepreneurs, how can they use their book as part of their own referral engine and use a book to drive referrals for their business?
Well, so I see a lot of businesses do this or I should say a lot of authors do this effectively. And I think sometimes people hesitate to do this because there is sort of an upfront time and monetary cost. But one of the most brilliant strategies I've seen people do is, they identify somebody that, maybe they have a connection with them or they can, develop a connection with them, and they give them 25 books and say, look, I'd love for you to share this with whoever you want. I mean, obviously you want to get agreement. Don't, you just want a box of books showing up with no context, but they basically say, look, I'd love it if you would, I respect your work. I'd love it if you, if you thought this book was a worthwhile read, that you'd pass it out to, your customers, your, network, and just, with some word of encouragement. And, for a lot of folks that could be a great way to sell more books because, that influential person might have very influential clients who can buy, or refer the book to thousands of people. If you are trying to get work from that, it's a great calling card. I have a network of consultants who actually license our methodology and our systems, and we collaborate as a network. And I mean, they use Duct Tape Marketing, like crazy as a calling card for their business because it articulates for the ones that will read it. Let's face it, some people won't pick it up and read it, but they're like, oh, you got a book, you must be smart. But for the ones that actually read it, it does a great job of explaining how working with that consultant is going to be a different experience than you've ever had.
That's great. So it's a differentiator. Are there any other ways that you have used or currently use your book kind of embedded in what you do to embed in referrals?
Well, we use it a lot for, and again, I wish I could tell you some, amazing secrets. A lot of people do some of the stuff I'm talking about, but in the fall, when in September of 2021, when my next book comes out, I'm speaking at about 10 events in September and October already, and most of those events are purchasing books for attendees. And why I love that one is because I'm at a point where I do charge a fee, for my speaking, but I'm waiving that to sell books. It's kind of a win for me. And it's really a win for the event because they not only get, what they hope is a great presentation for their attendees, they get something tangible to put in their hands as well. So, that's a strategy that most, authors that do any kind of speaking employ at some level.
Yeah. And then you're building in the virality, right? Not only are hundreds, maybe in some cases, thousands of attendees getting a copy of the book, you're teaching the methodology, and then they're now going out as advocates of that book with book in hand. Yeah. And so it's a win-win-win kind of all around there.
Well, and I've done a lot of work with, I love manufacturers and distributors. Because they all have large networks of clients that they want to help. They know that if their clients can be successful, they're going to buy more product from them. And so I have on many, many occasions pitched doing webinars for, a group of distributors, clients, and that they will buy books for all of the attendees, really cheap for them. I mean, they spend a couple $100. They get me to come for 45 minutes and educate. And, in many cases, we develop client relationships with then their distributors.
Win, win, win. Love it. So John, you said you're about 7 books in. What would you say are top 2 or 3 things that you've learned, either strategy or tactics, that have sold the most books kind of so far?
Well, it's that partnering with organizations that, that want to do training or want to do teaching, to their, locating those folks and developing relationships with them, has probably been the biggest thing that I've done that you don't see everybody doing necessarily. And that one's such a win because it turns into book purchases, but it also, every time I do one of those, we get an inquiry, for marketing consulting as well. So
yeah, that's great.
So that's probably the one. I will say a couple points, that I've over this, 7 books. My first book came out in 2007. And, to give people, anybody who's a little discouraged, to give somebody a little encouragement, it's gotten a lot harder. That's one thing that, not enough people say. I mean, there are probably 10 times the amount of books, 10 times the authors, 10 times the opportunities to get, really great content that didn't exist, 15, 14 years ago. So one of the things that I think has really happened, and this has happened in pretty much every channel of marketing, is it's not enough to just have that book. I think you have to really surround that book with a lot of assets, additional assets, especially, I mean, if your whole goal is to sell 1 million books, then focus on selling 1 million books. But if your whole goal is to build a brand around that book, then you need a free course on the front end. You need a $199 course on the back end. You need a $1,500 a month coaching program to go with it. I mean, that's, I think, how you really take a book and you kind of create this whole ladder of assets around it.
That's great. So John, I'm kind of in the home stretch here, and I've got a quick question on self-publishing versus traditional publishing. And then I'd love to hear more about your upcoming book. What are you doing differently, launch and stuff like that. But first, I think you're mostly traditionally published. I was doing some digging. I think 1, maybe 2 self-published. And then I've noticed it's Penguin, HarperCollins, Wiley & Son, so different publishers. Yep. So I think it's just such a great case study for folks on publishing with different publishers and self-publishing versus traditional publishing. So how do you think or make a decision on, do I self-publish this book or do I traditionally publish it? And then also any tips that you've learned kind of for authors from working with different publishers?
So the first one's self-published versus, traditional publishing. I mean, quite frankly, traditional publishers, there's very few of them left. I mean, they've consolidated like crazy. So, one of the considerations might be, is a traditional publisher even interested in your work? And I hate to say it, in most cases, if you can prove you can sell a whole lot of books, they'll be interested. Otherwise, it's a little tougher slog these days. So that's the first one. Self-publishing may just be your first best avenue. But I really also think it comes down to objectives. If you really think about it, selling 50,000 copies of a traditionally published book, will probably net you about $75,000. So, if you're doing it to make a bunch of money, that's kind of the math on that. But if, selling 10,000 books yourself, which then give you the absolute ability to white label the book, put a sponsor message in it, do a million different things, then and totally retain control, including control of the audio, portion of it. That, and again, that might be the best path for you because it gives you more opportunities to bundle and repackage and do things. Now, if you sell 10,000 copies of a self-published book, you wouldn't be the first person that then got the attention of a traditional publisher as well. That certainly happens. We all know examples of that. But I think the biggest thing that self-publishing does is you retain total control over how you want to do that book. I mean, you've probably had folks on your show. I gave that example of the of the distributors and things. Had I self-published Duct Tape Marketing, I could do pretty easily, Duct Tape Marketing with a cover, that had that manufacturer's logo on it. That's that, and that, that's
idea.
It's like selling coffee mugs, right? But it's a book with their logo on it, and I think tremendously valuable. So there's. I don't know if you want me to name names, but Phil Jones is a great example. Exactly What to Say is his book.
Yep.
And he is sliced and diced on top of selling a lot of copies of it himself. He has sliced and diced that a million ways and variations and bundles that are actually probably more profitable in some cases than a traditionally published book ever would be.
That's really interesting. On that note, John, so that's the self-publishing versus traditional publishing. If we're thinking strictly traditional publishing, if that's the route that folks are choosing they want to take, how do you choose which publisher to use? And knowing what you know now, is there any lessons learned of different publishing houses and better or worse experiences or things that you've learned?
So take some of this with a grain of salt. When I started in 2007, there were a lot more publishers. I actually was able to land an agent who has now turned into a very, very high profile best-selling author himself, agent. And that's a huge advantage for getting, your books into places. So that doesn't, there aren't as many agents because not all publishers even care if you have an agent, anymore. It used to be you wouldn't even get in the door unless you had an agent that had some clout, but that's no longer really the case. But so in my particular case, that not only allowed me to get, as a first-time author, a really pretty good deal. It actually allows me to shop my next projects around. Most traditional publishers will have in their contracts that they give first right of refusal. So you come to them with your next book, say, here's what I'm thinking. And if they go, I don't know if that's for us, you shop it around. If you've had any success at all, you can basically say, here's what my last book did. And it's pretty easy for somebody to say, okay, I'll take a shot on you. So in my particular case, my first book was published by a company that then got bought up and, actually went back into Christian publishing only. And so it was really not an option to go back to them. I landed with Portfolio for 3 books and had a really great experience with them. My next book I wanted to write was totally different. It's called The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur. Just, they didn't get it at all. It didn't seem like any of my other books. They took a pass, which in my particular situation was great because you want a publisher who's excited about the work, not just excited about what you can sell. So that was with Wiley. And I, all these publishers work a little differently. The thing I did like about Wiley is they were a lot faster. I mean, we put that book together, contract to ship in 12 months.
Wow.
That's
fast.
Well, especially since I had to write it all in, 108,000 words in 90 days. But and then my next book is with HarperCollins Leadership, and they are much more methodical. I think they're actually probably a little more process driven, and so far the experience has been great with them. But you'll find, a couple things. I mean, if I could throw out some tips, all contracts are completely negotiable. All kinds of elements. What I love to do is, a couple of cases, I've retained the audiobook rights. They didn't seem to care. That's not as easy anymore because everybody realizes people are buying more audiobooks than anything. But, that's up for us. When I sign a contract, they'll typically, the standard boilerplate thing is you get 10 copies, delivered to your door. When I was like, no, give me 500. And they're like, okay, because I'll use those in all the ways we've talked about. So, if you are going to go with a traditional publisher, at least seek out somebody who's done a couple deals and say, what are all the things I can ask for? Because stuff that doesn't really cost them money, like couple $100 at the end of a run, is easy for them to say yes to. Know this: you will be really, unless you have a very big name, or you are writing a book that is on like an incredible news hook, you will do a lot of the marketing yourself, self-published or traditionally published. Know that that's going to be a lot of that's going to be on you.
That's great. Anything else that you negotiate contract specific? That's great. I love those tips.
Depending upon the book's foreign rights are really negotiable. Some of the bigger houses have great relationships with foreign publishers, and they, a couple of my books sold, foreign rights before they were even out, and that's nice because it's pretty easy money. You don't ever see royalties from those, or at least I don't. Maybe it's because the book didn't sell billions, but I get advances for those. But I don't get, there's nobody in China that's reporting, here's how many books we sold of Duct Tape Marketing back to the publisher. And I think a lot of them know that too in the business publishing world. So they just take the money up front. But those, if you're working with a smaller publisher, or if you're self-published, there are places that that will be interested in your book. Just a little extra legwork, but that could be. I've seen people that will sell $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of rights. And same thing. They do the translations. They design the cover and do all the work. The other thing, it would be derivatives. So in the business world, I think there's a lot of opportunities, particularly for, consultants, that are trying to get work off of, their book, to actually say, okay, here's my main book, here's the main concept, but I can niche this book down for these 5 industries. And the reality is you're changing the cover, you're changing the case studies, you're changing, some terminology. But that's another thing that if you go with if you self-publish, you can do it all day long. But if you go with a traditional publisher and you have that in mind ahead of time, most of them just have kind of restrictions. I mean, you obviously can't just take the work and, put another word in the title. You've got to actually rewrite parts of it. But that can be a great option to, if you have those rights, that can be a great option to sell to partners. So, if I were going to do duct tape marketing for electrical contractors, I might go to the biggest electrical contractor association on the planet and say, look, I'll let you write the foreword. We'll put your logo on it, and now it's going to be the book for electrical contractors that you put in your marketing library.
That's smart. John, we're in the home stretch here. I want to talk. You told us a little bit about the premise of your upcoming book launching in September 21st. It's the ultimate marketing engine, 5 steps to ridiculously consistent growth. Can you talk to me about what are you doing differently to launch and market this book, kind of based on what you've learned from the last few books?
So the biggest thing I'm doing is the last couple books. Obviously you rely on your house list, you rely on your network, as much as possible, just kind of traditional stuff. But, I've been a podcaster since 2005, and I've had over 2,000 guests on my show. And my last book, The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, I was on about 300 shows. And there's no question that those sold books, but I've never been very good at the old call to action thing. And so sometimes, it's like, yeah, go, here's the Amazon link. Hope you buy one. So I'm really going all in on podcasts again, but I'm going to do it in a way. In fact, Chandler, I would publicly invite you to consider this if it sounds interesting. But I'm creating a course that is some premium content that if you buy a copy of the book, you get free access to this content. But I'm going to courses and websites now are so easy to clone, and so I'm going to really offer that to every podcaster to allow them to actually give that course away to their listeners, but also co-brand it. And if they've got something they want to put on there, to be an extra asset, for their particular, their market. So the hope is with that, the big kind of stretch with that is that, being on somebody's show is great. They'll promote it. They want listeners. But having something tangible that somebody can go and get that has a high perceived value. And let's face it, the people that get that course will have to give us their email address for login. And so it's also an email capture because, one of the things that a lot of authors make is, there are tens of thousands, probably not hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of copies of the Referral Engine out there, and I don't know who has any of them, right? And and I think that's it's partly the way the publishing industry has worked. Frankly, the publishers don't have any idea who has any, because they sell them all to Amazon, they sell them all to the corner bookstore, and that's their customer. And as an author, your customer is the reader. So, how can you get closer to the readers so that you can build a community, you can learn from them, you can, let's face it, offer that 20% of them that would buy anything from you. Now you've got a way to reach out to them.
That's great, John. And if you're listening or watching, guys, go back, check out the episode with Pat Flynn. He's got a really great episode on this podcast about how to create a companion course and how to use companion courses to, I think he got up to like 40-50% of opt-ins from John, honestly, that might even be a good one for you to listen to as you're prepping for your companion courses for the next book. Last question or two here. Those are great tips. Knowing what you know now, John, what would your advice be to the John from 7 books ago and the other Johns out there that are about to write and publish their first book, knowing what you know now?
So, I mean, if there's anything that I look back in hindsight and think, I probably should have done that differently. I wrote books to write books. Duct Tape Marketing certainly has been my flagship book. I've built a whole business and brand around it. But my other books, the Referral Engine, the Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, I just kind of put those out there. They sold a lot of copies. But, a year in, 2 years in, they're still, in fact, 10 years in, the Referral Engine still sells a nice amount of books, but I didn't do enough to keep that brand alive. I mean, that's a separate brand by itself. I really kind of was all in on Duct Tape Marketing, but those brands, think of your books as brands. And John Jantsch, can have 5 brands that are all, kept alive by, structuring partnership deals and things like that with people who want to keep them alive. And I think that's probably, in hindsight, I should have done a much better job of kind of building those individual franchises rather than kind of going, hey, I'm John Jantsch, author, and I'm Duct Tape Marketing.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing that. John, you said you don't do the call to action well, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway. Where can people go to find out more about you, to buy your books? And most importantly, I mean, you mentioned the companion course. I know this interview is kind of a little bit far out from the actual launch of the book, but especially where can people go to pre-order your upcoming book?
Sure. So pretty much everything I've been doing for the last couple decades can be found at ducttapemarketing.com. And that's DUCTTAPE marketing.com. And just there on the homepage, you'll scroll down a little bit. You'll see all my books, including the new book. It'll be out in September of 2021. But as you said, the good old Amazons of the world will take your credit card today. So pre-order it so you can be one of the first people to get it. And again, I'll reach out to you again, Chandler, when we have that companion course.
That's perfect. And people so go to ducttapemarketing.com, and I'm sure close to the book launch as well, you can find a link there that goes to to pre-order the book or especially the companion course. Like you said, guys, it's called The Ultimate Marketing Engine. It's coming out September 21st of 2021. John, thank you so much, man. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Chandler. It was great.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you're looking for next steps and help with your book, here are 2 things that'll be helpful to do right now. Number 1, go to spsfreetraining.com. We've got some awesome training right there. It's going to help you get started with your book, write your book, launch your book, publish your book successfully, and use that book to get leads, sales, and referrals for your business. So that's the first thing, spsfreetraining.com. When you register for that training, you'll also get a free copy of my book published. Now, the second thing is if you're serious about this book and you're just ready to get started, book a call with my team at Self Publishing School at selfpublishingschool.com/apply. Okay, so selfpublishingschool.com/apply. And we'll talk with you about your goals for your book, your challenges with your book, next steps. How do you get this thing published? So number 1, for free training, go to spsfreetraining.com, or to book a call with the team, go to selfpublishingschool.com/apply. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there are so many podcasts that you could be listening to, so I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this one. Now, I want you to do two things right now. Number one, I don't know if you know this, but we've actually got a YouTube channel with all of the podcast episodes in video form. On that channel, it's the Self-Publishing School YouTube channel, as well as a ton of other helpful videos around writing and publishing a book successfully. So check out the YouTube channel, subscribe to that channel. And then number two, subscribe to the podcast here, so the Self-Publishing School podcast, and leave a review. So do that seriously right now. It's so helpful. It'll make sure you don't miss an episode in the future. So subscribe, leave a review, seriously, right now. Yep, do it right now. Hey, and I also host the 7-Figure Principles podcast. If you'd like to check that out, great podcast around scaling a company. So whether you're a leader or entrepreneur, you might like that. But thanks again, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you can be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. All right, number one, I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number one, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number two, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, number two, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number three, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help the podcast get discovered by other people. So number three, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. If you're on the fence about scheduling a publishing consultation call with my team, maybe you're not quite ready for that, I've got some free training that I think will be really helpful for you. All right, all you have to do is go to register to sign up. Go to selfpublishing.com/free training. When you do, you're also going to get a free digital copy of my new book published. And on that training, you're going to learn the next steps of how to implement with your book. So how to write, how to publish, how to launch successfully. So go to register right now at selfpublishing.com/free training. I'll see you there.